some more.
Yo, what's good, people? Izzy Max here, back again with a new video. I did just now start a new league. This is a VGC style league, and today we're just, me and my buddy Ryan here, are just going to go through the teams. I'm going to kind of keep my thoughts to myself since I am a coach, but Ryan is a backup coach, so he's someone who's looking in on the league, and he can kind of see the teams, so he's going to kind of discuss what these teams are strong, weak, whatever the heck he wants to talk about. But without further ado, Ryan, go ahead and say hello.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I've been doing competitive Pokemon for a while now. I do mostly singles, but I have a lot of experience with the VGC meta. I've actually helped Maxwell out during his last season. He would consult with me sometimes for team ideas and building ideas and things like that. This is a really cool looking league. I like a lot of the teams that I'm seeing, and I'm really excited to talk about some of them.
Yep. So before I didn't rank these, the coaches themselves in the league ranked everybody. So coming in at the lowest score with a 10.1 average is Ninblox.
Yep. So looking at Ninblox's team, I see some good offensive pressure. You got mons like Weavile, Darmanitan. The big issue. There's a couple issues with this team, though, that I'm also seeing right off the bat. And correct me if I'm wrong, Maxwell, but in this league, you can, if it just says Darmanitan, that means you can bring either the Galarian form or the original form. Is that correct?
Correct.
Or like the Alolan form if there's an Alolan variant.
Yep.
So one of the problems I'm seeing here is that you have Weavile, Darmanitan, and Cloister, which are all ice types, potentially, because the Darm can be an ice type. So that gives you a really, really, really bad Rock Slide weakness right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these mons are also frail, and they're not used frequently in doubles. There are some good options here that I'm seeing at times, like Clefable and Gmax Gengar are certainly not a bad combination. Sableye is one of the best prankster users in the meta. The problem is I don't really see... There's a lot of offensive pressure here that can't be utilized particularly well, because the team is so frail that it just loses to a lot of priority and follow me.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any kind of redirection, this team has a really hard time with that. Setting up Cloister is borderline impossible with this team. You can do Shell Smash Cloister as a classic in singles, but one of the reasons it doesn't see a lot of double success is because Cloister's special defense is so low. Like, if a team has Heat Wave, Cloister's done, right? It can't set up. If they have Rock Slide, 2 Rock Slides probably KOs it, even if you're running Wide Herb and you're kind of getting rid of that defense drop. It certainly has some interesting options. I'm also just seeing a lot of weaknesses just in general to fighting types. Fighting types outside of Clefable can roll. Clefable and Gengar can really roll a lot of this team.
What is your favorite pick that he made?
My favorite pick? Definitely the Clefable or the Sableye. Sableye quash strats are very fun and they're very effective. The other thing I like about Sableye is that he essentially can use it as an offbeat weather setter.
Yep.
Sableye gets some weather options available to it. So against hard weather teams, a prankster user with any kind of setup like that's really helpful. It's got good Will-O-Wisp support. I'm a big fan of that. Clefable is one of the very few redirectors available in the format, and it also it currently gets Magic Guard too, so it also absorbs status really well, which things like Thunderwave spam from other prankster users, I know someone in the league has Meowstick, things like that can be kind of hard to deal with in this sort of format, so it's really cool to see those two mons. I think that some of his synergies too can work by being facilitated by Clefable and Oranguru. Oranguru I don't think does a lot for this team, but I'm interested to see what his strategy is for it.
Right. Okay. Next up is Jizzy with an 8.64.
Okay, so I actually, for context for viewers, I actually looked at all the teams prior to this.
Real quick,
gathered my
this
thoughts.
slot is Passimian. I just haven't typed it in yet.
Okay, so that's Passimian. Just real quick, I did actually glance at all the teams for the viewers at home. I've seen these teams before. I'm really, really surprised to see Jizzy ranked this low. If I'm going to be totally honest with you, I think his team is... I don't think it's one of the top teams per se, but I think it's actually very much in the middle, if not one of, if I was to rank all 12 of these, it would, for me, this would be anywhere from a 5 to a 7 on the list from what I saw.
Right. The little bit of input I'm going to have is, because he is so low, which surprised me, was he has Psy Spam, he has Azumarill, Passimian, Talonflame to set up priority Tailwinds, also Butterfree.
Yep. What I'm seeing here, just some options for coaches to look out for. Like you said, Psy Spam, Alakazam, and DD is a classic Psy Spam combo that kind of destroyed Low Ladder Smogon for like 2 weeks before everyone started countering it. But it can be hard to deal with. The other thing that's important to remember is Indeedee has Follow Me and Terrain support in one mon.
Yep.
And that's huge, because one of the things that's hard in a draft league like this, there's weather control and then there's terrain control. And there's so few, and Indeedee's one of, in my opinion, 2 current really good terrain setters. His team has really nice speed tiers overall. Talonflame can really also boost that with Tailwind. I think that's a great pick. Talonflame Azumarill lead is actually really frightening on this team. Really hard to deal with that stab combo, and the ability for Talonflame to facilitate huge power Azumarill is huge. There's also the classic, well, not classic, but the new Passimian receiver Azumarill, where Azumarill has a really low special attack, so you use Misty Explosion on your turn with a Choice Scarf Azumarill. What happens is that the Misty Explosion, Passimian's receiver, causes it to get the huge power ability from Azumarill.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, Passimian has huge power, and it hits like, that thing has great coverage and great defenses already, and it hits incredibly hard. Very good combo. I'm seeing that there's Luxray and Tauros on this team. I think the Luxray makes sense to me. You need an electric type. I'm sure it was kind of lower down on his picks. The Tauros is typically used as an Intimidate mon in doubles. It also can be used with gimmicky Anchor Point strats. I don't really see, because Frost Breath is the only guaranteed crit move, and I don't know if any of these mons get Frost Breath. I don't think so.
I have no idea.
I'd say the biggest weaknesses of the team are the frailty and the reliance on a strategy to go off. The team has some really good strategies, but a lot of the things that are facilitating those strategies are very frail and have exploitable weaknesses. Like, Durant's a great sweeper, but it's 4 times weak to fire. And DD Alakazam is great, but it can also just lose. If if Rillaboom's in the game, that strategy doesn't work. It's one of the reasons why Rillaboom is so popular. If you got Pincurchin, that strategy is not working. So, or any way to overwrite that terrain, or any way to get around the Psy Spam hurts that strategy. Talonflame's 4 times weak to rock. Butterfree is 4 times weak to rock. So there are definitely weaknesses on this team, but it can facilitate some strategies that are very high level play and very hard to deal with. So that's my overall thoughts.
Favorite pick?
I'm gonna go with Passimian as a last pick. I think, because that would be the last pick, correct?
Yeah, that was his last pick.
Passimian is a really smart last pick on this team. It covers a lot of the weaknesses, gives you a lot more strategies, and is extremely valuable.
Right, because you can even run it Defiant, and it helps with like Azumarill.
Intimidate. Yeah. It helps Azumarill and Durant out. It's just a great support mon, and I think it really, really ties this team together really well.
Yeah, that would have to be my favorite pick as well. Okay, next up is Dark King at an 8.1.
Okay, so looking at this team, there's a couple things that stick out. Obviously, Incineroar is pretty infamous in VGC. Porygon Z is getting a lot of use right now. It's a great Dynamax mon. You Dynamax it, and those max strikes do insane damage and lower speed, which is huge. Grimmsnarl is a great support mon for Porygon Z because you can set up screens with it. You can get Thunder Waves off, because Porygon Z is not the fastest thing in the world. So being able to get those Prankster Thunder Waves off could actually really facilitate speed control on this team. Grimmsnarl also makes for a decent offensive mon in of itself. Milotic is good at stopping Intimidate, which he uses himself. Dracozolt is a lot better in doubles, I think, than in singles, in my opinion. It's a solid mon. It's got some great stuff to it. Caparaja has a nice Dynamax form. Pretty low special defense. Big issues I'm seeing with this team. Speed tiers. This team is overall very mid-speed. it loses really. It has a hard time with hard Trick Room, is what I'm noticing. It has Runerigus and Slowbro, I guess, but like those things aren't killing Trick Room sweepers, you know?
Right.
This team also has issues with the fact that it is so mid-speed that it can kind of get overwhelmed. And I'm not seeing like unlike with Jizzy's team, where I could point and say, oh, there's this good strategy. You can do these things. These mons really synergize well together. There's nothing here everything here is, they're all good mons, but I'm not seeing, to me, yes, this is the thing that makes this team come together and really work.
Right. Well, the one thing of input I'm actually going to have with this team is I feel like he's going to have trouble deciding what he needs or wants to max every game.
Yes, I agree. He has a lot of potentially good max mons. One thing that I actually think might be really slept on with this team, Weakness Policy Incineroar with Bulldoze, Runerigus, is a really nice combination. Runerigus in general actually can do some fun things with Wandering Spirit. I also think Serena's pretty solid for this team because it doesn't have any redirection, and it's kind of weak to Fake Out, so having something there that can deal with that is really nice. But that's my thoughts on the team. I think this is kind of a fair placement. I don't think it's a bad team by any stretch, but I just don't see how some of the teams that are higher up on this list shouldn't have any problems dismantling a lot of the strategies that he has available to him.
Right. He also has the only scrappy Fake Out user.
He does. Hello, Kangaskhan.
All right. Next up, we got John Boy, also at an 8.1.
Okay, so these two tied. Real quick, let's go back to Morgan. Dark King, so I can mention favorite mon.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I actually am a huge fan of Mienshao. Coaching Mienshao is such a good strategy that people are sleeping on. It gets U-turn, Fake Out support. It's got Regenerator. I think it's a very, very underrated mon in this current meta. It also fixes some of his speed tier problems by being so quick. It's not like, I think it's one of the most unconventional picks, but I think it actually is one that could really, really, really help him out in the long run.
My favorite pick would have to be the Slowbro. Galarian Slowbro, if it holds the
the Quick Claw, 50%
the quick
chance.
It's actually like 43 or something like that. It scales a little differently, but yeah, it's kind of funny.
All right.
Okay, now we got John Boy.
So right off the bat, I'm seeing our classic combo last season of Lowland Persian Gallade.
But with Arcanine.
And Arcanine. For those unfamiliar, last season that you did, I didn't provide a lot of input for the season, but when it was draft time, you showed me the mons you had, and I recommended Gallade. And you went, why are you saying Gallade? And I told you, like, Gallade will carry the season, like, trust me. And then it did, and you admitted it. Arcanine, so just in general, some things I'm noticing, there's a lot of good Trick Room options with this team. Escavalier Dusclops is really solid. Hatterini is almost guaranteed to get up terrain. It's a great Gmax mon. Jellicent's bulky. A lot of the time, Jellicents run like Strength Sap, Will-O-Wisp, Trick Room, and Shadow Ball or Scald. Just a good, solid defensive mon. Rabombi is really slept on for its power. It's very fast. It's got Speed Swap. It's got really high-powered Moonblast and Bug Buzzes. I actually think that offensively, that thing can put a lot of pressure on. Blastoise there at the bottom is certainly kind of more of a niche pick, but I think defensive Blastoise is actually better than offensive in the VGC format.
Well, you got to remember, it also did just now get its Gmax form.
Yep, which lets it go through abilities. I didn't see a lot.
No, it's like Charizard's.
It's the damage over time. It's the damage over time, which is really good. Just some thoughts. The more I look at this team, the more I like it. I think it's really well constructed. There's definitely some really good combos. I really actually am a big fan of doing Minspeen Arcanine with Dusclops and doing Bulldoze on Arcanine, get the weakness policy proc. That's a fun strategy I've done before. You also have Justified on Arcanine as well as an ability option. You can always do beat-up strategies with it that are facilitated through Lowland Persian. The big issues with this team really come down to the fact that the sweepers that are available are frail. Arcanine is, I would say, probably the most defense. Like, it's the most bulky. Arcanine and Blastoise are the most bulky of these sweepers, but Hatterini's very frail. Escavalier, if you have one fire move, that thing goes down. Gallade's a great mon, but man, that thing just does not take physical hits well.
No.
As we know.
I'm excited to see what Licky Licky does.
I am too. Cloud9 has really thrown me off with that mon before.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot it had it one time for a draft league match. Blastoise, to me, if he had some kind of redirection, this team would be really... I feel like this team would be about one of the top contenders with redirection.
Yeah.
If this team had a way to redirect moves so that Blastoise could always set up a Shell Smash like relatively safely, I think this would be one of the best teams in the league. As it stands, I think it's really good. I actually think that its current placement's a little low.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of good strategies. I'm mostly worried about speed tiers. I'm also worried because there's no electric immunities, and electric, like max electric is really good. If you're looking at his team, everything is hit neutrally or super effectively, and a couple of his really important mons, like Jellicent and Blastoise, get hit really hard. Also, dark types are very good against this team.
Yeah.
You can, outside of Justified Arcanine, you really have no issue just clicking knockoff like 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Speed Swap Ribombee is going to be doing the Speed Swap with other than Escavalier. So there's also that.
Gmax Hatterene, Escavalier, Gigalith.
Oh yeah, Gmax Hatterene would be good.
Gallade late game if you already have the beat up.
True.
I feel like this team is going to rely heavy on Trick Room and Speed Swap.
I agree. I also think that it's going to be very... It's going to have this team in particular is going to have a very hard time dealing with any kind of redirection, especially because a lot of these mons outside of Gallade don't get a lot of spread moves, from what I'm seeing. Okay, next team.
Favorite draft?
Ooh, favorite. You're right. I love Arcanine. I think it's great on this team comp.
Mm-hmm.
You can run it supportive, bulky. You can run it offensive. You can run it weakness policy. Justified or Intimidate are both really solid abilities on it.
Right.
And I think that a lot of good strategies are facilitated by having Arcanine on this team.
Mine is the Persian. As you've seen 1 week, we didn't even run it. We didn't run Fur Coat because we had no threats from a physical attacker, and we ran Technician like Icy Wind and Snarl.
And it just won us that game.
It definitely did. But yeah, Persian probably have to be my favorite pick. So next up we have C-Rad at 7.82.
Okay. Looking through this team, my very first thoughts when I saw this team were ground weakness. Holy moly. This team has Rhyperior's weak to ground, Persian's weak to ground, Magnezon's weak to ground, Lantern's weak to ground, Salazzle's weak to ground, Jolteon's weak to ground. And Max Quakes are everywhere in doubles. The other thing is, this team it has Porygon 2 as its Trick Room setter. The issue is a lot of the people in this league have fast taunt users, whether through Prankster or just having something quick with taunt. And if Porygon 2 can't set up Trick Room, I don't see how this team wins a lot of matches, honestly.
Right. Does Noivern get taunt?
Noivern, yes.
Okay, so he has like the fastest taunt user in the game.
That isn't Prankster, yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of things that are sticking out to me about this team, it's super Trick Room heavy. There are some fast mons, but like they're not... Jolteon's the fastest mon on this team, especially because if I was running this team, I would probably run Quick Feet.
Yeah.
Quick Feet Jolteon and then use Rising Voltage with Pincurchin. But yeah, the ground weakness is kind of a big problem. This team has a hard time with spread moves. It's just very Trick Room reliant. There's not a lot of ways to... If you have a water ground, like if someone has Seismitoad, I don't see how this team handles it. Because Tangrowth is not handling a Seismitoad if Seismitoad's partner can beat Tangrowth, which it probably can.
Right.
And there's some good sleep pressure, there's some other things. I honestly...
Sylveon.
Personally, yeah. Sylveon is one of the best mons for this team because it gives you so much type advantage and coverage. But even still, that means that Sylveon can't run specific items if you're going to change it off Sylveon normal. You also don't have a ghost type, so you can't even do goofy stuff like Choice Band Explosion, which can be really good. It's certainly not a bad team, but I feel it doesn't feel like it will work super well for doubles. I think long term. I think the longer the season goes on, the more people will kind of learn how to play around this team. Any kind of terrain control and any way to deny Trick Room, I think, can really just guarantee you a win pretty quickly.
Yeah. All right.
Um,
Favorite pick.
I actually really like the Jolteon.
Okay.
It's a mon that hasn't seen a lot of usage. However, if we're looking at it fairly objectively, Jolteon with Quick Feet outspeeds everything in the game.
Yep.
And it has Volt Absorb as well, which I think is... I wouldn't ever bring spam electric moves against this team, but hey, it's an option. But I think Quick Feet Jolteon is actually kind of cool here. I think, too, that its special attack sometimes gets a little underrated, but that thing can hit very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a nice option because essentially you can run a Trick Room Pincurchin kind of setup with the Lantern or potentially the Magnezone, or you can just open with just really hyper offense, and I think that Jolteon was really important to give that option.
Right. If your team is weak to electric, this team will definitely destroy you. Jolteon is also my favorite pick, but for different reasons. I'm seeing a discharge Pincurchin next to Volt Absorb Jolteon.
Ooh, that would be good. Hold on one moment. Let's go ahead and move on to our next.
Yep. We have Hunter at 6.91.
Okay, so Hunter's team I think is really good overall. I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about the first thing I see, which is that this team has 2 Rain Sweepers and no actual Pelipper or Polytode.
Yep.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing because Lapras can facilitate max geysers relatively well.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you always want to commit to maxing Lapras just to get Rain up, right?
Right. Well, and if you max Kingler, you can get your Rain up yourself as well. So
Yeah, so there's options. In general, some things I'm seeing, Lowland Marowak is a huge threat right now, I think. This team really benefits from having that thing there. Thick Club of Lowland Marowak just hits everything so unbelievably hard.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Gmax Lapras, setting that Aurora Veil up can really facilitate that mon really nicely. Conkeldurr saw a lot of use in the early season of VGC. It's not getting seen a lot of use right now because of other mons, but in a draft league format. Yeah, I think in a draft league format, though, Conkeldurr's a really smart pick. Alcremie's really good with Lapras.
Mm-hmm.
You can do Choice Scarf Celebrate, and then you can protect. You can do a Max Guard on the Lapras turn 1 or a Protect, and then all of a sudden Lapras is looking extremely threatening.
Decorate, not Celebrate.
Or yeah, Decorate. My bad. Gen 7, baby. Scrafty is one of my all-time favorite mons. I wish it didn't have a 4x Fairy weakness, because otherwise it'd be pretty incredible. It gives you some nice Intimidate support. It's also potentially a good sweeper. There are limited numbers of Fairy types in this meta, so if you're fighting someone who only has like maybe 1 or 2 good Fairy types, Scrafty is like a really solid pick. In general, some issues I'm seeing with this team are, again, weaknesses to common types. Lightning Rod Marowak is going to really help with that. This team really likes Trick Room, but can't really get it up super well. I think Gothitelle is a really inconsistent Trick Room for setting up Trick Room. It doesn't really have the necessary bulk. It's really easy to shut down with Taunt and other options. And if you trap it, and if you're trapping Mons, then it's harder to take advantage of your Trick Room turns, in my opinion. Because then it's like... Because then the switching out, because Gothitelle is one of those mons where you can basically just double target whatever the other mon is because Gothitelle's not putting on any pressure.
So the main way I actually look at this team is I don't see it as a Trick Room team. I look at it as having Trick Room counters.
Yes, and I would agree with that.
Also, don't sleep on Gothitelle Lapras because he does now have Perish Trap.
That is true. He has Perish Trap options. I actually really like this team. I think it's pretty cool. I like Rotom Mow on it too. I think that really rounds things out. Exploud is a fun mon.
Rotom is a good ally switcher.
It's a good ally switch. Also, having something that's a Grass Electric type actually really helps the coverage options on this team. I think it's pretty solid. It's a very like bulky offensive team with like a bit of a Rain Core and some anti-Trick Room. But it doesn't. But the issue I'm seeing is really that if you run Brick Break, how does this team this team's bulk starts to die without a Gmax Lapras. And if you're not running, and if you don't want to Dynamax Lapras, you want to Dynamax Marowak or Kingdra. This team has so many Mons at once to Dynamax that it's kind of a bit of an issue.
Right.
As for favorite Mon, my favorite is Alcremie on this team.
Agreed.
Because it can really facilitate quite a few of these Mons pretty nicely. And it pairs great with Lapras, and on its own, having that nice offensive fairy pressure is pretty nice. I think it's a good solid pick.
Yep. Next up is Toxic at 6.55.
Okay. I'm going to be totally honest. Toxic's team has a great starting core, and then it kind of falls apart a little bit at the end for me.
I would say after Meowstic, his draft kind of fell apart.
A little bit, yeah. I want to kind of explain my thoughts, though, as to why. So, first off, you have some pretty good mons to start. You have Excadrill. Excadrill Tyranitar is a great combo. Hitmontop, in my opinion, is one of the best fighting types available. It's got Intimidate. It's got really other cool things like Wide Guard and Quick Guard, which stop priority moves and spread moves, which are very nice, especially for Excadrill and T-Tar. You got Gastrodon, which is a great Storm Drain abuser. It does really well in Sand, and it can bulk up very, very nicely in this metagame. Gmax Charizard is a threat. That thing has won regionals, and that chip damage over time is really nice. And Meowstic is a great Prankster user, and it can also be run competitive. So you can either have that Prankster Thunderwave spam like I was talking about earlier, or I think it gets screens. So you can do some screen setup. Or you can run it competitive, and then all of a sudden it's working as a sweeper.
Especially with T-Tar Excadrill, having a competitive mon's really good.
Yeah. But then Rotom Heat is traditionally a really solid mon. I don't think it's a great pick on this team because this team already has issues dealing with a rock ground combination.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden it has Levitate, but now Rock Slide spam becomes a lot more viable against this team. Like,
for sure,
T-Tar doesn't take a lot, but a lot of mons that get Rock Slide also get good fighting coverage. Like, a good example earlier would be Gallade.
Yep.
You can just spam Rock Slide on Gallade and use close combat and kill T-Tar, and all of a sudden there's some issues with that. Garbodor is also weak to ground types. There's a lot of ground weaknesses on this team. Overall, ground and rock is a really solid combo against this team. Sylveon's one of my personal favorite mons, period, to use competitively, but it doesn't actually do a whole lot for this team. One of the big things that you can do with Sylveon that I think is really cool is that it has Quick Attack Pixelate. So it has a fairy type priority move, and it has a really low base attack. So it's really good at proccing weakness policies. And the only thing this can proc a weakness policy on is T-Tar.
Hydreigon.
If you want to take a lot of damage on Hydreigon, even with even with the minimum amount, Hydreigon's taking a lot of damage from a 4x effective move. Yeah, this team just has some issues typing-wise, I think. A lot of grass, water, fighting, and rock really hit this team hard overall. I also just don't quite see the synergies outside of the weather core. Outside of Excadrill T-Tar, like, this team doesn't have a whole lot of particular things to me that stick out as, oh yeah, that works really well together. I think that if you build your team appropriately to deal with the weather, and if you build it appropriately to deal with the Meowstic being kind of annoying, or Sylveon and Hydreigon like throwing out big hits with like an Assault Vest Mon, you can probably weather his storm pretty well. It's certainly not a bad team, but I feel like there are several teams that have come prior to this that I would rate a little bit higher, personally speaking.
Right. Well, one thing I will note, he said that he picked Charizard because the pick before him was actually Volcarona, which is what he wanted to pair with Hitmontop.
That would make a lot more sense. Volcarona Hitmontop is kind of a classic combo.
Yep.
That really works well together. I still think Charizard's actually a great part of this team. I just think that Rotom Heat was maybe not the right play. I think another electric type, I actually even think something like even something as weird as it is, Rotom Wash, Rotom Frost, I think would actually be better on this team. And I love Sylveon and Hydreigon. I think they're great mons, but I don't think that for this core of mons, they add a lot.
Right. All right. Favorite pick.
I'm actually going to go with Meowstic. I think that this team has a big weakness to Intimidate. I think having the option to do competitive with that Mon's really, really good for deterring that. I also think that the Prankster Screen, Prankster Thunderwave could really win some important matchups, especially because Excadrill and T-Tar can get so bulky.
Right.
And it also lets you facilitate a little bit more of Hydreigon and Sylveon's kind of higher but middling speed tiers against some of the fastest mons available. It can really help those mons facilitate a good sweep. So I'm going to go with that because I think it's a great support pick.
I'm going to agree. Other than Gastrodon, but then he still has that big grass weakness. But yeah, I think Meowstic was my favorite pick. Okay. Next up is Brock at 6.36.
Okay, so I'm only watching this league from like a side view, right?
Yeah.
But I still looked at all the teams, and I actually messaged Brock and told him that he has like my favorite team in the league. I don't necessarily think it's the best team per se, but I love the synergies here. I think this is one of the most fun teams to build with and play with. It's got some really great mons. I definitely think it deserves its spot here. I think it could go a little bit higher or a little bit lower depending on your opinion, but I really like this team. I'm glad to see it. First off, this team works really well with pairs of certain mons, so I'm going to kind of talk through each pair. First off, you have Rillaboom Hawlucha. Hawlucha can run Grassy Seed, get its Unburden boost from the terrain that the Rillaboom sets, and then Hawlucha is set up to sweep right off the bat very easily, and Rillaboom is so offensively pressuring. I mean, it's currently one of the best mons in the entire metagame, and there's a reason for that. Choice Band Grassy Glide is no joke. You can Life Orb, Fake Out, Knock Off. There's so many options with that mon that work extremely well, and that pairing is really nice that I haven't seen a lot of it. I want to talk about Comfey and Goodra, which I think is a really, really, really good solid core that a lot of people will sleep on.
Real quick, you have to add Rillaboom into that because Floral Healing doubles in grassy terrain.
Yep, and I actually knew about that interaction. I forgot to mention it, so thanks for that. Something I really like about Comfey and Goodra is that those two mons work so well together. Goodra works really well as a bulky Dynamax mon. You give it an Assault Vest, and you give it 4 moves, and you can actually run it physical with Comfey because Goodra gets Sap Sipper. So all of a sudden, Comfey can use, I think usually you just use Giga Drain. You use Giga Drain on your Goodra, you get it that plus attack bonus, and with the Floral Healing, giving all of its healing moves priority, like this thing can just heal Goodra, and that thing is unkillable.
Also use weakness policy Draining Kiss.
Yep, you got weakness policy Draining Kiss. You have a really good synergy there with the Aegislash as well. Really ties all of these mons together so nicely. Other mons that are really good, I think Centiskorch is a great Dynamax option available in matchups where it looks really good if the team doesn't have a lot of rock types. Centiskorch can really go to town. That mon as a Dynamax mon has that residual damage effect. It's not as potent as like Gmax Charizard's.
It's a trapper.
But it's very good, and it has some good trapping options. Gyarados actually looks extremely good in this league. There's a lot of teams that have good electric types, which can deter it. But the thing is that Intimidate Gyarados and Setup Sweeping Gyarados is so strong, and neutral hits aren't going to do a lot to it. And with Comfey and Rillaboom like facilitating it, like that thing could be a huge issue.
Also pairing it with Raichu.
Raichu with that Lightning Rod, absorbing anything for it. Raichu is a great support mon with Nuzzle, Fake Out. You got the Urshifu, which is a great late game cleaner in my opinion. Espeon doesn't do, I think, a ton for this team. The Magic Bounce is nice. And Espeon
it gives him a Trick Room option, yeah.
Yeah, it gives you some anti-Trick Room, and a little bit of, I think it gets Ally Switch and screens. So,
I think so.
You know. Mudsdale is another great sweeper. I also think this one really pairs well with Comfey, because you can get that Giga Drain off. You can do like a weakness policy and heal it up, because one of the issues I've ran into whenever I ran Mudsdale myself is that as it takes damage, that mon can't heal any of it off. Comfey partnering with it, great idea. Love this team. I think it's going to be really successful.
Favorite pick?
Oh, that's really hard with this team. I actually am going to go with the Comfey.
I'm going to say Comfey too, yeah.
I think that's a mon that's really slept on in general in the current format, because its stats are kind of middling, admittedly. But with the combination of Floral Healing, the Grassy Terrain, the Goodra setup, the Mudsdale setup, facilitating Aegislash better, facilitating Gyarados better. I mean, wow, what a mon just like tying a team together. Like, I think it's a really good option, and I'm glad that he went for it.
Okay, next up we have Tay Breezy at 5.36.
Okay, so Tay's team I really like. The first two picks we can just talk about: Whimsicott, Cobalion. Pretty much, I think the best beat-up combo available right now in the current metagame.
Agreed.
It's got Cobalion is so naturally bulky, and when you give it that extra, and it doesn't have the best attack, but I mean, when you're at +3 attack, nothing doesn't matter.
Yep.
That your attack's a little middling, like you can work around that. You have Dracovish. Dracovish Whimsicott is a great combination.
Don't have to run Choice Scarf.
Yep, Volcarona is a really nice mon on this team. It really ties that together. Toxtricity, in my opinion, in the current like VGC metagame, is a good anti-meta pick. For a draft league setting, I'm really curious to see how well it'll work out for him, because the ground weakness is pretty bad. His team also is currently suffering from a little bit of, I wouldn't say it has a big typing issue, but again, similar to a lot of these teams, a Rock Slide Earthquake combo or high horsepower combo can take care of both Volcarona and Toxtricity, and those mons usually work really well in tandem. Like, it could have a really hard time beating Excadrill, for example.
Real quick, a combo I didn't hear you talk about is actually Volcarona Dracovish, because Volcarona does get Rage Powder, and with Dracovish
and redirect,
only being really weak to Fairy and Dragon.
Yep. And then you have the Volcarona also with that. Bulky Volcaronas are typically really threatening because Flame Body also has a chance to burn anything that attacks it. So very solid there. I like Umbreon here. Diggersby is a good offensive attacker. I think, too, it helps with some of the typing coverage issues that I was mentioning earlier. Umbreon is a great support mon in the current format. Foul Play, in particular, I think is really good in a draft format where people are trying to create synergies to really boost their attack stat. I think that having something that can take a hit and say, nope, you're at +4, but I have Foul Play die, great.
It also gets Snarl.
Yep. Snarl support's always good, and Wish as well. Wish Protect is kind of a classic on that mon, and Yawn.
Yep.
And I haven't seen a lot of Yawn, actually, in this draft so far, so having a really good Yawn user is good. Sigilif is a really fun mon in singles that I like. It has some really fun doubles, like Shenanigans it can pull. Pelipper is a rain setter. It really it can give Dracovish the calcs it needs, is what I'm kind of viewing that as. It also, to me, feels like a pick to deny someone else from doing something.
Yeah.
Which I support that. Like, if you're in a draft league setting and you see someone setting up like a heavy rain core or something like that, and you're before them, and you're like, you know, this helps my Dracovish. Yeah, take that rain mon. Don't let your opponent have it. And actually, the Pelipper is really fun because it works really well with Beartick, because Beartick can get both Slush Rush and Swift Swim. And Beartick has a really high base attack stat and can really surprise somebody out of left field with how fast and strong that thing can get. And Kadrigas, I think, is a really solid Trick Room setter. Not that his team necessarily has Diggersby for a good Trick Room option, but overall this team I think would mostly be using that to deny Trick Room or just to have something bulky on the field to absorb some hits.
Will-O-Wisp, Ally Switch.
Yeah, just to
it's just a support mon. Favorite pick?
I'm actually gonna go with the Volcarona.
Okay.
I think that Volcarona being able to be used both as a setup sweeter and a support mon is really good. I also think that Volcarona ties up that trifecta of Dracovish and Cobalion really nicely. I also think it just pairs well with Whimsicott in any situation, in any scenario. So I'm going to go with that as my pick.
Mine's going to be Diggersby. So this team has a lot of speed control. Whimsicott boosting your speeds, and then Diggersby being the hardest hitting normal type on the physical side, with PZ being on the special side. But max normal, of course, lowers their speed.
Lower speed. Yep.
So, yeah, there's a lot of speed control on this team.
Agreed.
Next
it's
up,
a very solid team. Big fan.
Very solid. We have Hubbub Nublet at 4.18.
Yeah, I think this team is great. I think that especially once we've hit these top 5 teams, there's the big thing that you're going to see is that there's going to be a lot of redirection and a lot of different strategies that are available to these teams that they're harder to prep against. they're very multi-dimensional.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm actually going to talk about is at the very bottom, the Palossand Celigor.
Yeah.
Palossand Celigor is something that is hard for most teams to deal with, period. So for those unfamiliar, Palossand has the ability Water Compaction, which raises its defense every time it's hit with a Water-type move. What you do is that you run a Celigor with Water Shuriken, you hit the Palossand multiple times, giving it up to max defense, and also proccing a weakness policy, giving it +2 special attack, and then you just kind of click buttons, and then when it comes back to, and then once it's not Dynamaxed anymore, you can click Shore Up, and if you're in Sand, you can heal up to 75% of your HP. I mean, that thing, it is very rare to see successful stall strategies in doubles in particular, but that strategy is a stall strategy that's also extremely offensive that can just beat a team.
Mhm.
Like, you can turn one win with that. Cinderease, I think, is currently one of the best mons in the metagame. I think it's competing for like top 1 or 2, honestly.
It's probably your best offensive mon, yeah.
Yeah. Things like, there's a lot of Intimidate in this league that I think is specifically directed to deal with a Cinderace issue or a Rillaboom issue, and I think that's appropriate. Cinderace, though, the ability to change types is so good for this mon. It has a lot of really good options. I think it actually works on this team particularly well as a fighting type, because there is no real like other fighting type. I think the ability to boost attacks of mons like Snorlax and Mimikyu and the Urshifu is really nice. Other mons, Snorlax, Gmax Snorlax with Gluttony is very hard to deal with, and Mimikyu can set up Trick Room for it.
Classic Mimilax.
Yep, Mimilax is a very good strategy that people need to be careful about. You also have things like Venusaur and Ninetales, giving you that really, really, really fast, really offensive lead that puts on a ton of pressure. You have sleep pressure, you have just the raw offensive pressure, and Gmax Venusaur in of itself has that residual damage.
Yep.
And Gmax Vine Lash is a really powerful attack. Bisharp deters, like I mentioned, Cinderace is very afraid of Intimidators. Having Bisharp there to deter Intimidate is extremely intelligent. And I also like Togetic because it's really good for redirection. Follow Me is one of the best moves in the game, and Togekick is one of the best, I think is the most specially bulky redirector available right now.
In terms of raw stats, it's more bulky than Togekiss.
Yeah, and it's hard to deal with. This team is extremely good. The biggest thing I'm seeing with it, though, and one of the reasons why I think it's 3rd place on this list instead of like 1st, because I think it's a really well constructed team. I love everything it has going for it, is the fact that it is fairly, it's a very linear type of team. If you can predict what this trainer will bring, then you can create a very nice win con, I think.
If you can beat Cinderace.
Yeah, if you can figure out what the Cinderace is doing, and whether it's going to be like Snorlax Mimikyu or Ninetales Venusaur or
Palossand
Celigor, if you can figure out which is the best strategy for this trainer to do, and you can predict around that, I think you have a better shot of beating it. However, the sheer options available to this team and the depth of the gameplay that they're afforded because of the picks they did, I think really speaks to it. I think the speed tiers on this team are great. Really good slow mons, really good fast mons. Just overall love this team. One of the best for sure.
Favorite pick?
Favorite pick? I'm actually going to go with Snorlax.
Okay.
Because it comes a little out of left field as a 2nd pick mon. But I don't think anyone in the draft would be looking at Mimikyu. Pairing Snorlax with this team allows, I think, a lot greater depth of strategy. I think there are some mons on this team that are fairly frail, one-dimensional attackers. I think adding Snorlax to this team, just a very nice bulky attacker that operates well in Trick Room, really, really does a nice job of covering up a lot of the holes on this team. Having even just thick fat Snorlax with like an Assault Vest can get around some of the fire weaknesses that I'm seeing on this team, some of the rock weaknesses.
Well, it can even be supportive with Yawn.
Yeah, I think it overall would be my favorite pick for this team because it's kind of weird as an early pick to your draft, but to me it really kind of defined the rest of the building for the team and did a really nice job of saying, no to a lot of potential counterplay that your opponents can bring out.
Well, my favorite pick is actually going to be Pix, and it's going to be the Palisana Selgor. Just because this team, like you said, is kind of susceptible to Intimidate. So the Bisharp helps it. But if you're fighting a team with heavy Intimidators, well, just bring Palisana Selgor.
Yeah.
And you're fine.
Absolutely.
All right, next up we have Matt at a 3.73.
Okay, so Matt's team, to me, is extremely interesting. Because I think in a lot of ways this is the most conventional-looking team on the list. Like, in terms of just standard, good old 2020 VGC play, right? I mean, you're seeing staples like Togekiss, Duraludon, Rotom Wash, Amoonguss, Chandelure, Ferrothorn. Those are all, like, and Inteleon even. Those mons have all been really present throughout the season, but there is a reason for that. First off, Togekiss is hands down, I think, like one of the best mons currently available. Max Air, it can be run bulky, supportive with Yawn. I think Crit Kiss is going to be really good in this league. There's a lot of things in this league that have defensive boosts, and a lot of teams that are weak to even like a good Heat Wave. Like a good crit Heat Wave deals with a lot of teams really nicely in this format. Amoonguss is one of the best redirectors. It has Spore and really good support options, and it boosts the whole team. The one mon here that really to me stuck out a lot is the Duraludon. So for those unfamiliar, Duraludon has the ability Stalwart, which allows it to ignore Ally Switch and follow me. Whatever you target, you hit, and it beats every redirector. First off, Matt has Togekiss, so obviously
and Amoonguss.
Togekiss and Amoonguss, so he already has two of the best redirectors. Duraludon also beats anyone else's redirection. It beats Togekiss, it beats Togetic, it beats Indeedee, it beats Clefable, any option that they have.
I would say the only redirector that it doesn't beat is Volcarona.
Yes, and even still, against Volcarona, it can certainly do a lot with a Max Whirlwind kind of attack. Rotom Wash is a great mon to pair with this team. I think it needed a good electric type. And combining Rotom Wash with Amoonguss and Togekiss, I mean, that's just a classic combo. A lot of offensive pressure, very bulky. Chandelure's great for stopping Trick Room through Imprison. Chandelure in of itself is also a deceptively hard-hitting mon. That thing can hit for pretty insane amounts of damage. Crocodile is one of my favorite personal mons. It has Intimidate and Moxie and Anger Point as abilities. It's got a good speed tier, Intimidate. It's got things like Lash Out to stop Intimidators. It's got Knockoff. It's got really nice ground typing. Overall, one thing that you'll notice with this team is the typings are very diverse, and they really complement each other well. So then you have Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn, in my opinion, is very on and off in terms of how good it is. However, if your opponent's team doesn't have a good fire type or good fire type coverage option, by even just having Ferrothorn in the back, you are forcing your opponent to carry some fire coverage, right? You are forcing move slots. You are forcing pressure, because if your team can't beat a Dynamax Ferrothorn, you just lose. Because Dynamax Ferrothorn is a huge threat that can just bulk up and win. It's also extremely good against most Trick Room teams that I've seen in this. Like, for example, a really well-built Ferrothorn, I think, just beats, for example, C-Rad's team with all the electric types. I mean, how does that team, without carrying a lot of fire coverage, touch Ferrothorn in Trick Room?
With no Torkoal being drafted, I think Ferrothorn is the slowest thing. Yeah.
Liepard is one of my favorite mons in terms of prankster users. It's got an extremely fast Fake Out, Thunder Wave. The other thing it has is Copycat, which is a move that's used a lot to copy Tailwinds in Trick Rooms.
I don't see him using it much.
I don't see him using it a whole lot either, but I think it's still a good pick and a good mon.
Yeah.
Polytode and Vanillix. It's interesting he drafted both of these mons. They're both weather setters. Polytode, of course, has Perish Trapping options, which I actually think could work potentially really well on this team. And then Vanillix denies Hail and gives this trainer a lot of options to do Blizzard spam with the Inteleon that's the last mon. One thing I'd really like to comment about Inteleon in particular, the Gmax form is able to ignore abilities.
Storm Drain, Water Absorb.
Also, Inteleon and Togekiss both have crit options. They're able to guarantee crits, which get around defense boost. Like, his team has the easiest time dealing with the Palo Exceligor of any team on this list.
Yep.
Because it can just snipe shot Palo Sand and just one-hit KO it. And there's nothing that you can do. I think this team is mostly as high as it is on this list because of the fact that it has so much good counterplay to so much available to so many of the other trainers. It's not necessarily that the team has the most synergies per se, it's that the team has the most ways to deal with what everyone else is going to be throwing at it. The only real complaint I have is the speed tiers on this team are really weird. I also think that Inteleon should have been replaced with Beartic.
Right.
Because with the combination of Polytode and Vanillix, you can, if this person had drafted Beartic instead, then all of a sudden you have a really, really interesting mixed weather sweeper that your opponent has to predict for and be prepared for, which doesn't really exist right now. The weather currently feels very secondary on this team.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it's adding a lot to it. However, the mons themselves are pretty solid.
Yep. All right. Favorite pick?
I went on a long tangent about Duraludon, so I think I have to say Duraludon. I just think Duraludon's a great mon for a draft league setting, and I think that even though it is not the flashiest Pokemon per se, I think that it just handles everything that we're dealing with extremely well.
Right. I'm going to have to go with the Crocodile because looking at this team, I can see a huge electric weakness. Of course, Rotom Wash isn't weak to it, but you know it's not a reason.
Amoonguss helps as well.
Yeah, but I think Crocodile is going to really be key to this strategy that I think he's going to be running. So next up is me, and I got a 2.8 or 2.18.
Okay, so the reason why I think your team is number one is because it is the most synergistic team in my opinion. Because it has the most strategies available to it, making it the hardest to prep for. So let's discuss Dragapult and Colossal, just to start. Dragapult can get procced by almost everything on your team. You can run a weakness policy, Dragapult either offensive or specially offensive, and you can have that activate with the Gourgeist, can use Shadow Sneak. You can use the Mamoswine, you can do an Ice Shard if you wanted to.
Yikes.
Yeah, that's a yikes, but it's an option available to you. You have different options too, such as the Colossal and the Dragapult together. Dragapult, a classic strategy is that you use Surf on Dragapult, activate the Steam Engine on Colossal, get it to plus 6 speed, activate the weakness policy, and sweep from there. And Dragapult itself is applying so much speed and offensive pressure. Like, it's going to be very hard for opponents to simply deal with the fact that you can open with Dragapult Colossal, have almost guaranteed turn order control, and boost right off the bat.
Yeah.
You have Primarina, which is an extremely bulky water type and fairy type that can also Aqua Jet the Colossal to proc it as well. I think that's a very solid option. Dragapult also has Beat Up, which allows it to let Terrakion sweep potentially, and I think a Terrakion Dragapult sweep is very good. You have Clefairy, which I think is a mon that was very slept on in this league. Clefairy has Friend Guard, which means that all opposing attacks do 25% less damage. When you consider how much spread moves are already getting reduced in this league, and considering how physically bulky mons like Colossal, Braviary, Mamoswine, and even Primarina and Terrakion are, considering how bulky those things get with that Clefairy Friend Guard, it's insane. Clefairy also has Follow Me support, which is huge. I've mentioned that multiple times that I think redirection is key to doing well in this league. You can also do... doesn't Braviary gets Justified, correct? So...
Defiant.
It gets Defiant, so you also get the Defiant with Braviary as well. So it's harder to intimidate your team down. And Dragapult has Clear Body, so some of your key sweepers are really hard to deal with. You have Riolu as well. Now, Riolu is really interesting. One of the big things it can do for your team is Reniculus actually went to a regionals and got second place. by using Trick Room, because when you max guard and click Trick Room, what happens is that the Riolu can copycat that and then have a guaranteed Trick Room go off, essentially, because it'll be a Prankster Trick Room.
Right. In that regionals, it was Liepard, but yeah, I had to settle for Riolu, which I thought was almost kind of an upgrade because of coaching.
Well, there's a few other things, yes. So there's coaching Riolu, which allows you to boost the attack and defensive of mons on your team. It's really good on Dragapult for Braviary, Terrakion. Another thing that you can do with Riolu is that it gets Vacuum Wave and Bullet Punch. So you can actually Vacuum Wave and Bullet Punch Mamoswine, potentially.
And Terrakion.
Which are very solid options. Gourgeist can activate Dragapult's Shadow Sneak. It can also use Trick or Treat to turn other mons into ghost types, allowing Dragapult to hit the entire field super effectively. And so you have good Trick Room, you have good anti-Trick Room, your speed tiers are really good on this team. Dragapult is extremely fast. Colossal operates either as an extremely fast sweeper or an extremely slow Trick Room sweeper.
Berserker.
Mid-tier. Berserker's extremely slow. Reniculus is slow, but Terrakion's quick. Braviary is a mid-speed mon that uses max airstream, so it's in effect, it's pretty quick. It also gets Tailwind. No, this team, in my opinion, the big issue that other trainers are going to have with it is you have so many options available to you, and there's such an ease of setup with most of them. There isn't really, like, if you bring out Riolu, the question then becomes, is he going to bullet punch something? Is he going to coach something? Is he going to copycat what I'm doing? Is he going to do this? If you bring, like, Dragapult Colossal, it's like, well, he surfs. How do I beat that? I can't fake out the Dragapult. I can't, and I can't redirect a surf. And if you have no redirection, I mean, floor is open for you.
It's also my weather denier.
Yep. Riolu is able to deny weather with Prankster. So in terms of my favorite pick on this team, we've talked about it a lot, so I'm going to go ahead and just say Riolu. It facilitates almost every strategy on this team extremely well in of itself. I think that there are, of course, strategies on here that I think that are really good that don't involve Riolu, but I think having it there as an option can just really elevate your team to have so much more depth of game and so much more options available to it.
Right. So my favorite pick is actually going to be the Berserker. So I drafted this mon thinking Reuniclus gets Flash Cannon. Steely Spirit Flash Cannon is ridiculous. It's like 120 base power.
120? Yeah.
But also, so does Terrakion, Braviary,
Dragapult.
Mamoswine.
Dragapult got Steel Wing.
Steel Wing on Dragapult. Like, if I just need that extra bit to get a calc, Berserker can do it and also has Fake Out to help with kind of like my setups and stuff.
Yeah. That's my overall thoughts. I mean, a lot of these are like first impressions. I glanced at the teams prior.
Yeah. Well, it's also going to come down to coach's performance, but this is just where the teams were placed preseason.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to see what people do. I think especially some of the teams that I talked about earlier, especially because part of the thing about the top 5 teams is that I'm very aware of the strategies that a lot of the top 5 players are going to be using that I saw. I feel like there's a lot of people in that middle range there, people like Jizzy and Johnny and C-Rad, where there's a lot of really good options there that I'm interested to see how well they work for those trainers and if they can really get some really cool wins and really exciting games in with those.
Who is your dark horse coach?
I am going to go with Brock. Brock is my dark horse coach for this league. He is Brock or Toxic. I'm going to go ahead and say Brock, though. Brock, for the reason that I think his team has the best potential late game setups of anyone in this league right now. I think that his team overall has some issues, but the thing that's really cool about his team is that it can work around those issues and set up good late game win cons. Because he can lead with a particular threat, and then he has another duo that's in the back that can clean up if something goes awry.
Right.
And I think that dark horse, I think that is the definition of a dark horse, right? Someone who comes back and really ends up taking things away. I think his team has the most potential to do that. I think it also has really good play against a few of the higher up tier teams on this league that I'm seeing.
For that same reason, my dark horse is actually Hunter.
Okay, I think that's fair as well.
Him and Brock kind of have the same reason to be a dark horse coach. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for this. If you guys enjoyed, please do leave a like. I will be posting probably, I think, at least 2 games a week because my fiance, of course, is in the league as well. So be on the lookout for those games. And if you enjoyed, leave a like, stay in touch, leave a comment. And yeah, see you later. Peace.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.